Hi, this is Cindy Trexler coming to you again from the inside. This week I'm going to be discussing parenting in the new millennium. Only this week because last week I didn't have a chance to discuss the challenges of raising teenagers in discipline. Now again, anybody's welcome to listen to this, but I am speaking about African American culture in this particular segment specifically because this is what I know. So first, discipline. I was raised by parents that spanked, as I know many of my friends and family members were as well, and I am of the mindset that that is really a form of child abuse. Now, everybody is not going to agree with that, but I will point out that there used to be a time where it was okay to hit your wife as well. And in my opinion, hitting children provides an immediate solution to most likely a long-term problem. And when you're hitting kids, you're sending them a mixed message. You're saying that first, it's okay to hit you if my intention is to do well by you or to love you. So a young mind may not be able to differentiate between good hitting and bad hitting, and this can build a person into kind of a expectation in their life to where hitting is okay. And you know, when you get into abusive relationships and things like that, these are foundations, unfortunately, that create an environment that allows these people to stay in those situations. So I'm not saying that every child who is spanked ends up in an abusive relationship. That's not my point. What I am saying, however, is that there are better ways to provide discipline than hitting your child. And I get a lot of pushback from my very close friends and family about this. We have long, drawn-out debates. But I raised my son without corporal punishment. My sister raised her kids without corporal punishment. And they're not, you know, running around trying to shoot up the town or being unruly. They weren't unruly people growing up. They weren't spoiled because we spared the rod. None of that. None of that. They grew up adjusted people who were willing to talk about what was going on with them. It didn't make them perfect. There is no recipe for that, but it did make them willing to have a conversation with their parents. And now that they're all adults, they're still willing to have those conversations. You see, discipline is necessary. Children need boundaries. Specifically, our teenagers need very real boundaries. But discipline does not mean violent hitting. It just does not. And I know, you know, we're taught if you spare the rod, you'll spoil the child. We're taught that you hit them now or the police will hit them later. We're taught that you gotta get your bluff in early. All of those things. But as I said last week, if you lay the foundation of respect, protection, providing, you will find that you have an environment where your child, assuming that there are no extenuating circumstances like addictions or mental illness or anything like that, but you will find that with a solid foundation, your child will be willing to discuss things with you. And you won't like everything they discuss, but we're not supposed to. I think the thing in our community that has not transitioned very well is going from a model where it was, I'm gonna teach you, even if it means I gotta hurt you to teach you a lesson, to an environment that hitting is not acceptable in today's world. But our kids are coming up, they're going into a school system where teachers aren't allowed to hit them. But if they've been hit at home to discipline or to get them straightened out, and then they go to school and there's no hitting allowed in school, your child may interpret that to mean that the teacher isn't really serious, unless they are hitting him. And this is where we get into the problem. I mean, there are ways, you know. One of the things that I used to do with my son was don't take him to places that aren't kid appropriate when he was too young to sit down and behave, because that just creates frustration for him, for us as parents. It created an environment that kind of agitated the situation, and subsequently you wind up disciplining them by swatting them on their behind, or you know, popping them on their hand, or whatever it is, when in reality they probably shouldn't have been in that grown-up restaurant, or that restaurant that wasn't age appropriate. And that applies throughout, you know, as they get older, it's time for them to learn you can train them in different ways, how to sit down at a table, how to do this, as they become mature enough to handle those situations. And if we do these things while they're growing up, these little steps, boom, 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 one step after another, you teach this young person how to behave incrementally, then by the time they hit those tumultuous teen years, and they are tumultuous, you have a human being who has been taught how to behave in public. You have somebody who has real boundaries laid for them. And you have hopefully a dialogue or an environment going with your child where that teenager will be more likely as a teenager is, to sit down and discuss problems, because they're not going to be living in fear of what you're going to do. Fear is not respect. It just isn't. I've never met a person that's really fearful of another that really can show them real respect. Children should not fear the people in their house. But if you tell your child, come to me with anything, and they come to you with the thing that they know is going to get them in trouble, and your response is a slap in the face, or in the case of like when we were growing up, it was extension cords or switches, you know, these things like welts on your body. And I know people still do that, and it's an argument that we will have for many, many years to come. But I think that we know enough now to know that discipline does not mean hitting. I can't say that enough. It just doesn't mean that you have to put your hands on a child, a teenager, a young adult. You just don't have to do it. There's a reason why it's called assault when it's to adults, because it is a violation of someone's space. It's a violation of who they are, and it changes that person. So I implore people to ask themselves, to slow down the next time and ask themselves, would you want somebody doing this to your child other than you? Or would you want somebody doing that type of discipline on you? You know, if you do something wrong at your job, your boss doesn't get to punch you in the face. They don't get to get a belt and spank you. I just see it as the same thing. I know many people will disagree with me, but if spankings worked, we wouldn't have the incarceration rates that we have. We wouldn't have, those kids were spanked, count on that. And we wouldn't have the dropout rate that we have. Those kids too were spanked, count on that. Spanking does not create an environment that produces the type of young person that will do well within this system, because spanking teaches violence, and violence is not accepted. And when if violence is not acceptable in your system, then if that's all your child knows, and that's the way your child knows to communicate, that's when they know people are serious, and then that's how they in turn end up communicating with others, they wind up in trouble, lots of trouble. And so we see this perpetuated over and over again. These are just some of the things that are laid down that put us in this predicament as a community. Our kids we have an archaic way of disciplining. It's very, 1950s, 1940s type of mentality in a new millennium, and it's not translating, folks. It's not translating. We're not producing more stable people with this continuation of archaic practices that should have been thrown out the door many years ago. And again, I know that there are people out there who say, oh, my child curses, my child this, you don't understand. If you have a child who is very disobedient and things like that, I encourage you to seek professional help. Therapy is not a bad thing. Seek family counseling, try to get at the source of their anger. Make sure that there are no underlying mental health issues. Make sure that your child is not using some type of drug, that they're not addicted to something. Make sure that someone has not violated your child. Because oftentimes when a young life is combative, when they lash out at the people around them, it's usually a cry for help. And that cry for help should not be met with the back of a hand or a belt to the backside or some other violent, borderline abusive type of response. So that is my opinion. And I thank you for listening. I will be back next week. We'll be discussing poverty and the effects that that has on family, raising kids, etc., etc. Thank you for tuning in. Bye.